Well, welcome everyone to The Art of Growth. I'm Joel Hubbard.
I'm Suzanne York.
And I'm Jim Zartman. And today we are talking about success and sanity. So one of the questions that we ask on typing interviews is, what does success mean to you, or how do you define success? And you use that question in order to search for a type. But there's all these cultural overlays on top of it now. And I think a lot of people are asking this question, like, how do I have both success and sanity? How do I have wellness in my work? Because there was this badge of honor that we saw a whole generation suffer under, which is this just go, go, go. Like busyness was a status symbol. Even lack of sleep was a status symbol. And the cost of some of these things are starting to add up. We're starting to see it. People are saying, I don't want to miss my child's whole childhood. I want to be there for it. Success means more than one area of life. Success is wanting to broaden into a more holistic thing. But then a lot of us end up in this multiple guilt scenario where when I'm working, I feel guilty about not either taking care of myself or taking care of my family, or when I am taking care of myself and my family, like, am I actually not taking care of my work life enough? Am I not responding to clients fast enough? Am I not meeting expectations? And all of this has us in a swirl of confusion and anxiety and depression are on the rise. And I think all of this is a part of it. So this is a huge problem. Let's like solve that in the next like 15, 20 minutes. Could we just
solve it?
Easy.
Let's just solve that.
Let's just do it. Here we go.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, sanity is, we are losing it because we have so many, I think in part because we have so many options. I don't think, you think about you mentioned the generation beforehand. It had more of a narrow focus, I would say. It was pretty much work, and then home. And that was all that was really on the radar. Today, people are asking questions of, who am I in this whole thing? What is it that I really want? And what about my kids, and wanting to have a relationship with them and wanting to know them and understand what they want and what they would like to be when they grow up. And there's all sorts of things that we're now wrestling with that mean more to us today than maybe a few generations ago. I don't know. I just think that there's so many more options today, and I think that that's part of what is making it more difficult for folks.
Yeah, and along with the more options, we see people who are maximizing themselves in certain options, meaning social media helps us take on other people's, see what other people are doing, and they're showing us the best of what they're doing. Yeah. And what we don't know is, are they also doing the other things that are important to them, or are they doing one thing and one thing really well? Right. And so we get a really warped view of the options and what it means to do each option well. And then what's the reality? How many things can we do to a max capacity?
Yeah. And I think actually women are getting the brunt of this in our culture right now, because there's still some cultural evolutionary, however you want to have that perspective on it, that there's the nurturing element, that there is a real focus for the family. But there's also this additional layer of, and you have to be the work professional. Mm-hmm. And I think that they are leading this. Really, it's a culture of and. There's almost like the work culture is becoming a culture of and. How do I have all of these things? How do I do them all well? Because, like Joel's right, the previous generations, the focus is on, you go to work, you do a good job, and then, you come home and you kind of relax and you get a little time with your family. It's a bonus. You get a few hours of sleep and then you take off again. But there's this weight, and I think it's particularly on women right now.
Well, I appreciate your saying that. I feel the weight, and it's not because my husband isn't doing a lot. He's doing a lot too. I just think that there's certain elements that are there. It's just different. Yeah. I wish I could explain it or have better way to articulate it. Yeah. But even with all of the help that is out there, maybe it's the mental load, or I'm not exactly sure, but I do appreciate your naming it.
Well, And that's a really good question you bring up is it more of a context thing? Like there is all these things that we're facing, or is so much of this in our own kind of neurosis, like struggling, just trying to figure out what to do with all this and what are all the things we should be doing, and just the weight of, you brought up social media adds to it too. Like there is a lot of weight on all of us, and it's coming from a lot of different directions. And it's like, how do we sort through that to get clear on, my friend Jim Trick, who's been on the podcast before, talks about like this swirl of all these storms around us, but the values are the shelter. And we don't have a lot of cultural values because they've been all over the place. So how do we actually shelter ourselves from the anxiety, the weight that just seems to be doubling down on us from all of this stuff around us, the family, the options, as Joel mentioned, like all of these different things? Where do we even begin to start to take some of that stuff apart?
First off, I think that anybody who is experiencing some kind of depression, anxiety, grace to all of you. There is nothing to be ashamed about. You are not less than. Anyone who is struggling with the work-life balance is struggling because these things matter. These things are important to you. Knowing yourself, finding your particular desire, passion, dream, hope, and trying to care for your family as well as work hard and be able to provide for your family. All of these things matter, and they do matter, and that's part of the reason why it's so difficult, is we're trying to balance so many different things. On top of everything else that has come our way that isn't anything that we were planning for, COVID, physical illnesses, relationship breakups, all sorts of these things that are natural in normal parts of, even though they don't feel natural or normal, they are. Change and struggle and surprises and accidents and trauma and everything else. These are things that you didn't plan for. These are things that you didn't create necessarily. These are things that happen to you on top of everything else we just mentioned. So yes, if you're struggling with depression and anxiety, you're normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And I think just breathing around that and giving yourself some grace takes some of the edge off. And so that's the first thing I would suggest as a way forward for us is a collective sigh, a collective breath, a collective exhale. This is normal, folks. There's nothing strange about you. And yet, the reason why we persist in that is because of things like social media, like what happens at work when you're talking with other employees. Most of the time, people are not sharing, oh, yeah, I've had a real struggle with this or that or the other. Oftentimes it's what's going well in my life or, some problem, but still somewhat removed from our own experience of that problem. So people tell me all the time, and I'm sure they do to you guys as well, like the struggle they feel being alone in their suffering, being alone in their struggle. And I think that adds to it, that sense of loneliness in the midst of my depression and anxiety.
Yeah. There's two things that you brought up that are really healthy right there. And one of them is the normalizing. Like we are kind of all doing this. And two is the acknowledgement that you're not alone in it. I think so much of this, it makes us feel a little bit more alone, but we're not actually alone in it. And I think we're not as powerless as we feel sometimes. Because as you're saying all this, of course, what I have to do is like, okay, check my own heart again. What do I need to do differently? And so the first thing is I ask myself the question is, when I'm stressed, I want all these areas to go well, right? So I care about my family and I care about my work and I want all these things to go well. So I probably lose a little sanity around whatever area I drop first. What's the first thing to go when I'm really stressed? And for me, it's taking care of myself. The first thing to go is taking care of myself. And then I wonder why I'm not nearly as capable of handling stresses that come up in the other areas. Like, if I suddenly snap at my daughter, like, well, yeah, I dropped the thing that stabilizes all of it. But that's just me. I just know that for me, the first thing to go when everything gets busy, when everything gets crazy, is that piece.
I think that's spot on. I'm thinking about the analogy you used with the shelter in the storm. I mean, our bodies are our shelter, and we've been beating it up knowingly and unknowingly. Some of it, the badge of honor that we've had around how busy we are has caused us to prioritize other things and other people over our own well-being and wellness. And then when you think about what's happened to our bodies during the pandemic, meaning we're in high stress, and some people continue to be, we're not completely out of this, to the point where our physiological condition has been suffering. So our adrenals have been pumping, and our bodies are tired. And so it's not just going to be getting a good night's sleep that's going to flip the switch. Yeah. We need to be much more deliberate to repair the shelter that is our whole systems. And making time and prioritizing that and recognizing that, yes, it's a mental game, and it's also a mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we go too much into that, because I do want to explore that with both of you, but what came to mind was the shoulds that many of us live under. That adds to this whole weight of, depression, anxiety, that can contribute to it. Is, I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be a better parent. I should be reading to my kid every night. I should be, getting them to bed at the same time every night. I should be, and then at work, I should be this. I should be, there's so many. And then self-care. You mentioned self-care. There's that. Absolutely. I want to dive into the habits that really are tremendously helpful for helping us move out of this, to move into greater health, and it's an ever evolving and growing thing. But that itself can turn into an oppressive thing where it's like, I should be taking care of my body. I should be healthy.
Then you have one more area to be guilty about, that one more area that I'm not doing enough.
It is crazy that happens.
Oh, yeah, it's a good point.
I have people tell me, I should be, I practice gratitude, but I should be more grateful. It's like, well, that works against gratitude. The moment that you're into the should, that works against the very nature of gratitude.
Yeah.
And so everything that has to do with even self-development and growth can turn into a should. And then you're wondering why you're getting darker and darker and darker and darker and darker. And
right, this very thing that is supposed to remove weight from your pack is one more thing you're carrying around now.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And so I think it's...
I don't know whether I'm appreciating that wisdom or
I
I'm
know,
just
right?
annoyed.
I know. I'm feeling both right now.
It's
Yeah.
both of those. I'm feeling both of those right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I keep trying to think of a word that would help us even narrow down the shoulds to the things, the vital things, so that we get even more clear on what's important. I don't know. Is it the must-dos? I must. But then that's going to become the next should. So in my own mind, I keep trying to come up with, there's got to be a way to wade through the shoulds to get at the things that are absolutely integral. But I haven't figured it out yet.
We always say that there's some podcasts that we come with something really clear and some that we're going to go look for something together, because this is a demonstration of how to go look for something. And that's what we're doing right now. And I love that. I love that we're looking for something right now. So let's keep looking for it.
Yeah. And there are some things that I think you and I have tried, all three of us have tried, right? That has been really helpful to us. Like we've had certain exercises that we found, wow, this really helped. And then a few months down the road, that can turn into another should, right? Have you had that happen to you? Because I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I start a practice and it's like, great, I'm doing this and I love it. And I'm telling everybody about it because I'm a 7, so I'm going to do that. And I'm just like evangelizing the world around, you should be doing this kind of meditation. It's really amazing. And then a few months into it, it starts to turn into a should. And as soon as it does, for me, then I get really resistant. And then
and grace goes out the window. And we say grace precedes growth, and then grace goes out the window, and then we're just focused on the...
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, then I wonder if when it becomes a should, if that's actually not what you need anymore.
Huh.
That's a really good point, because I think that anything that you live under, the whole thing for me is that it has to serve my growth. Yeah. So for me, it has to be about, do I have a value of growth? And if it's serving my growth and my development, then that's something I want to do. Sometimes you don't see it. Sometimes it's a little bit more, it requires more grit because this is something I really don't want to do, right? So, for example, if you know in the morning, if for you in the morning exercise is best, and when you do it, you know that, man, 8 or 9 out of 10 times you're going to feel better when you do it. But it's hard to do it, and so you can slip out of it. That, to me, requires a little bit of grit and a little bit of perseverance to do it. But the result is there most of the time. That's a different thing for me. I can see those in my life, and I know those things, and I tend not to do them at times, and at other times I get into it, and I'm like doing it, and it's great. But I do agree that there's some things that are like temporary. Like they're just there to take you from this point to the next point. Yeah. And it's discernment around that. Like, oh, this one was just for this period of time. I can let it go now, and I can relax around this. I wish I had something more tangible to say about that, but that's...
Well,
I
I've
think you're right on
experienced
about
it
that.
where, February, I can think it was really rough. New England winters had gotten to me, almost a year of the pandemic. Like February is just particularly rough. And so I realized okay, right now I need to really double down on my meditation. And so I did, and I loved it. I was doing it, and, whatever. I was doing some on an app, and it was tracking me, and I did 120 days. And then I was like, now it's becoming a drudgery to stick with the practice. And then so I gave myself a break from it, and I continued to feel really good. And then I returned to it and was grateful that it was there to come back to. And so it was almost like it was giving me permission when it started to feel like I should do this. It was almost like my body or my whatever was telling me, go ahead and take a break, because that isn't the thing you need to spend your time and energy on right now. So I've just seen it in my life in different moments where things will come and go. And I never beat myself up and be like, oh, if only I'd meditated all the time. When you get back to it, you feel good again. I think that is meant to give you a break.
That's a really, really good illustration of that. I've been saying, these practices, or, whatever we call them, I for a while was calling them a rule of life, a rule for life. So I was using that for myself. They're there to serve me, not me serving those things. And when I put it in that framework or that way of looking at it, it helped me. At what point, okay, this is not serving me anymore, and I've given it plenty of time, and it is no longer doing that. So if I continue doing that because of the should, now I'm serving this rule of life instead of it serving me to help me to grow and continue to benefit from it.
Yeah, that's how quickly a tool can become a prison. I remember when, being a little lower on the self-preservation scale, when somebody introduced me to budgets originally, I was like, oh, it just feels so like a prison. And then the person who gave it to me is like, no, it's not a prison, it's just a tool. And there was something so freeing about that. It's like, oh, there's certain things that I do for myself. Like if I use it as a tool, it really does serve me. If it then becomes another prison, take a break.
Yeah.
Do something a little bit different for a time. I love that, because that, I think, adds a nuance to it, that it keeps it in the flow of grace instead of in this, oh, it's just too much try. And we all see people where it's just too much try. This is something different. There's an intentionality to it, because the whole point, we're trying to make ourselves more sane in how we show up in these areas of our lives. And if I bring it back to this work piece again, we want to do well in our work, but all of these pieces impact each other in how we show up in every area of our life. This is why we keep saying that the professional is personal, because the kind of person you are the rest of the time you're not participating in your work, shows up in that place and how you relate to each other, how well you are taking care of your own self, impacts how you do everything else. Suzanne, you always say that how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And so that really does bring it back to, I'm trying to create a holistic life. Sanity and success is a holistic kind of piece. And to be holistic, you need these little nuances. And I think that's a really helpful nuance of yes, this is a practice that served me. I'm going to take a break here for this season. And then I feel joy when I return to it. That is a really liberating arc.
Yeah. Well, and the whole image of an arc, I think insanity is thinking that success is a straight line. And so giving ourselves grace to not maximize everything all of the time.
Right.
And so if you choose to maximize something, then give yourself permission to let up on something else.
Yeah.
And you don't always even choose it. Like when I think of a new couple that comes together, when they first come together, there's a large amount of focus on the relationship. You know, when someone starts a new job, you're like in training, you're trying to absorb so much information. And sometimes it's like a months long experience of where you're just trying to absorb as much as you can in the information part so that you can actually put it into the physical realm, into the natural realm, and be able to have the skills to operate with it. So yeah, there's just seasons where something gets a bit more of a focus. And it takes something so that it can be a natural part of your flow and your rhythm. One of the most recent ones I changed was the sleep one, because I'm very creative in the morning. So if I'm cutting my morning short, I'm actually cutting creativity out of my life. And going to bed slightly earlier wasn't really costing me anything other than maybe some vegetation time. And I always tell people vegetation is not relaxation. And it was like listening to these neuroscientists talk about sleep, and we were referring to the last generation. And a lot of times there was like this badge of honor around not sleeping as much. And someone just posted a video where they're like, you know, successful people do not sleep 8 hours a night. And I was like, that is BS.
Yeah.
There's so much this culture on it. And because the neuroscientists were saying, you know, people who bragged about getting 4 hours of sleep a night, like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, both died of Alzheimer's, that like not getting enough sleep can radically impact your brain. Getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night actually causes low-level brain damage that like continues on and on. There was a whole laundry list of like the impacts of sleep. So I was like, I'm going to start this. But now it's just a natural part of my rhythm of life. That's not one I'm going to take a break from. I just keep with it. But it just means I'm always up at like 5-ish in the morning. And that's when I do all the writing. That's when I do a lot of creation. That's when I get a lot of clarity. And it's the best time to do that. So it's like what I even applied was grace. I wasn't applying anything to my life that was really a discipline. And I think this is one of those little nuances as far as the sanity piece. I wasn't doing something that was by force. I was actually returning to something I naturally am. And this is something that's happening in the world right now as people are working on crazy different schedules. They're working remotely. They're working on all these different things. Some people, they work great at 5 a.m. So they're not going to show up until 9. So you missed like 3 of their most productive hours. Like, so I think of like when we're trying to nuance this, like the success and sanity thing, like you actually have to return to your own wiring. Like, how are you best wired to show up in these different worlds?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that point. You know, I'm thinking a lot about when we tamp down who we are.
Yeah,
it has an effect on our physical being as well. And so, to your point, like, what are you made to do, and be able to build your life around that? That's a huge luxury. But really thinking about it in a new way, I think, is helpful.
Well, I agree. It is a luxury. You're absolutely right about that. You know, if I think of people who are maybe on the younger end, or people who are coming out of some real chaotic upbringing, where they had no structure, and they're seeking, how do I have sanity? Because I'm losing my sanity. A lot of it is things that are basic that I think are important. These days, as I coach people, I'm finding out things like, well, yeah, like you mentioned, Jim, lack of sleep.
Yeah.
You know, people that are not eating well, people that are not, there's very little self-care. There's a lot of disorder in their lives. And some of the basics seem to change so much when we're doing that. We're taking care of those. So for us, we've talked about that in the sort of head, heart, body triad, you know, thinking about self-care in those 3 dimensions. Like, are you taking care of your mind? Are you doing things that develop your mind? Like, are you reading? Are you being challenged? Are you thinking more broadly and bigger? You know, are you taking care of your body? You sleeping well? Are you eating well? Are you exercising? Are you meditating? These things are so very, very important for the body. You know, and the heart, do you show grace to yourself? Do you have good relationships? Are you connected enough to people? Are you having moments of experiencing love, joy, allowing the anger, and making room for pain, for shame, for those sort of emotions as well to come in, and just be loving towards those rather than trying to change them. I mean, I think if we're thinking about those in those three categories, then it does help to start moving into some kind of rule for life. But I do think that that is one of the big things that's so important, is having something. And as you had said, Jim, it's really deciding, figuring it out first. Who am I and how am I designed and what works best for me? And then creating some kind of rule of life around that as much as you can, depending again upon your circumstances. Your circumstances may be that you have very little autonomy, but whatever autonomy you do have, for you to reclaim that and to begin to use that in a way that serves you, I think is very, very important for sanity.
I hear all of those, and I think there are days when that's just not possible. And I think about, new parents or working parents, whether your children are young or not, the demands of work and the demands at home, they really do feel, at least they have for me, very all-consuming. And I have needed to get rid of that sort of victim mentality a little bit and find the areas that I can carve out. And I have found them, and I'm afraid of losing them when we all go back into the office.
Yeah.
And I've not found them perfectly. So trust me, there's still those days and weeks where I realize I've succumbed to the to-do lists and everybody else's needs. But there's a part of me that's really kind of dreading the full-on back to the office possibilities that are coming up.
It is tougher for some, for sure. I mean, I think that, I think so many things about this. Like, one is there's no silver bullet to anything in life. There are so many factors, that are involved in health, in times where we're feeling worse than other times. There's so many different potential causes to that. How have you, Suzanne, managed to do that with a mom of two very young kids, and at a certain point, a year ago, 2 years ago, they were even younger.
Yeah.
So, like, thinking back to even those times, like, sanity is something that is graded on a scale, right? Like, sometimes sanity is, my nose is above the water, and that's about all there is.
Right.
And some days I feel like I'm underneath the water.
Yeah. Seasons of survival, for sure. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I would say, and I wish I could say, I managed it beautifully. Let me tell you the exact way I did that.
Yeah.
But no, it was messy. Yeah. It still is messy. But the idea that I had someone say to me when I had my first child, hey, there's going to be moments where you're going to feel like you're killing it at work and you're falling down at home, and days when you think you're nailing it at home, but then falling down at work. That's going to happen, and let each one of those ebb and flow. And I had a hard time hearing that, and I'm like, I don't know how to fall down in either arena. How am I supposed to not nail it in both arenas? And looking back on it, I wish I could remember who said it. They were right, and I could see the times when I was more focused at home, and so work didn't necessarily get everything from me, and vice versa. Yeah. I do wish I'd given myself a little more of that grace, but what I remember feeling was that moment felt permanent. In whichever swing I was in, it felt like it was always going to be this way.
Right. Oh man, is that true?
And so how to realize that nothing really is permanent and let that be a good thing.
Did you also feel, because I feel this way,
did
you also feel like even my emotions and how I feel about things right now is permanent?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
It's like not only the circumstance, but the way I feel about it is permanent.
100%. And actually working with my daughter, who's got big emotions, we have this book that we're reading called Visiting Feelings. And it's a really great way to convey the impermanence of our emotions. Like, hey, this is someone just here to visit, and they're here to tell you something. What is it they want to tell you? You're angry? What is anger who's visiting you trying to tell you? And then when you can articulate, they're trying to tell me that I'm, whatever it is we've come up with, then we can realize, hey, we're okay. And we have a saying now that says, who's visiting? Thanks for coming and telling me what I needed to know. I'm okay, so you can go.
Oh, man. I use that for coaching for adults.
Yeah. Well, trust me, half of this time I'm reading it to myself. I'm not even in the room.
Yeah. I need to read this book myself.
Yeah.
This is so good. Yeah.
And it's helped tremendously. And I sit here and I think, oh, this generation has a leg up because they have this language that we didn't.
My gosh, yeah.
But they need to appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think I appreciate it because it was so lacking from my childhood and early, adulthood. But anyway.
No, that's so good. I use an image when I'm coaching sometimes about, this pond that's full of just different colored fish, and you're sitting in front of it, and the emotions, they're just different colored fish. They swim up, they visit you for a while, and they go away. And I think it came from a children's book.
Yeah, probably.
I think it probably did. But that one's
wisdom.
even visiting emotions. I think that's so great. Because I think when it comes down to this, sanity for me comes down to this phrase I come back to over and over and over, which is present yourself today to this, and you will have done all that is required of you. And I mean it as the big this, whatever this is. And this may be, I'm tired today and I don't have as much to give. This may mean this area of my life over here has a lot more demand on it. It may mean I actually have a little space to go into this over here. Whatever your this is, I put this in all caps in my brain, but present yourself today to this, and you will have done all that is required of you. And let that be a statement of grace over all of the comings and goings, the weaving of these seasons, the nuance of these things that we're trying to learn and embody. Present yourself today to this, and you will have done all that is required of you.
I really resonate with a lot of that because the energy that I think we put around so many things that are happening inside of our brains and so much that's happening around us. Sometimes we put energy that's negative around something that we have to do, something that we are, something that we're not yet, that we would like to be. And so this energy that we put into it, all of this energy contributes to our overall feeling about ourselves. And becoming lighter about things, like, oh, yeah, I'm overwhelmed. This day, my life right now, kids in my world, or I'm battling some kind of illness or something else, while trying to succeed, while trying to achieve and do something great in this world and leave your mark. If all you have in front of you is, this is what I can do today, that you do it with as much joy, and this is really an act more than it is a feeling sometimes. And a lot of what we're doing is, these are habits that we're saying, this, if we aim our lives in this direction, the tendency is that it produces better results. And so I'm going to choose to not put as much angst into this right now, into this moment.
Right.
And instead, I'm going to smile. Right? So this is an act of the body. And as we do this with our body, by the way, it affects our mind. Our mind actually interprets what our body does, oftentimes just as much as it goes the other direction. And so we deliberately get up and we stretch and we smile and we engage and we say, well, this is it. This is what I have today. So all I have today. Or, hey, I'm gonna be grateful in this moment. I'm gonna celebrate this moment. And as we do that, over the course of time, we start to see that, hey, I'm not feeling as bad. I'm starting to feel a little bit better. And I think in that direction, as we keep aiming our lives that way, I think that we're starting to aim it more towards our deeper values. And I think that that's a worthwhile endeavor for all of us. And hopefully that helps with the sanity and success piece.
I do hope that we can get to a point where the true conversation can be about success looking very different, but still as meaningful.
Meaning it's not as much about what...
my version of success doesn't need to be yours. Like, I feel like we have a version of success, a measuring stick that everybody is expected to live up to.
Yeah.
And my hope is that it starts to be, hey, how are you today? Isn't, oh, I'm good, or, oh, I'm busy. It's, I'm living up to my values, and mine can be different than yours.
Yeah.
Would you say your definition has changed?
It has, but I think reluctantly so. meaning I think I assumed that I could maximize everything. And when my body started taking a toll, that took a toll on my body, or I'd get to the moments of achievement and it wouldn't be as fulfilling or gratifying as I thought.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why did I just kill myself to get to the top of this mountain when it's not even that great of a view? And so I started saying, well, what view do I want? And which mountain has it so that that's the right one to climb?
That's a great question. What do I want?
Yep.
The deeper I want.
And the busyness of life has made it far too easy for me to not stop and think. It's so easy to go on autopilot and just do the next thing and not stop and think, is that the thing I wanted to do? And again, that might feel like a luxury. Well, I don't have a choice but to do that thing. Okay, that's valid.
Yeah.
And like you said, can you do it with a smile?
Yeah.
Can you do it with a different perspective?
So thank you so much for joining us this week. The big thing to know this week is there's a couples webinar coming up this Thursday evening, July 22nd at 8 p.m. Eastern, and you can get tickets at www.theartofgrowth.org. And even if you can't be there in person, if you have a ticket, you can watch it after the event. If you are interested in having some coaching and training for your organization, contact us at the website. We love helping companies thrive in their communication, both so it's more enjoyable, but also more efficient and effective by understanding and honoring where the other person is coming from in your communication, which serves the employees better, but also serves your customers. You can follow us on Instagram at Just Art of Growth. And we have weekly newsletters come out. So if you are signed up for that, double check and make sure we're not ending up in the spam box, because you know how computer algorithms can work. So make sure you're getting those. If you're not getting them, you can sign up for them at the website, where you can also schedule individual coaching sessions if you're at an inflection point and need a little breakthrough, and you can contact us about all of our work there. There's also a free Enneagram test there, a free Enneagram Instincts test there, as well as a youth Enneagram test. So we got the goods for you if you head over there. It's an honor for us to serve you in any way we can, and we are so grateful to get to do that. So this week, may you widen your expectations again. May you embrace the season you're in, but know that you are moving toward success and sanity, that you can expand in your work and in your influence in this world, but you can have a whole and rich, meaningful life where the great does not strangle out the good, or vice versa. May you continue to optimize your one wild life so it can both be enjoyed and leave a mark. Grace and growth this week, my friends.